The Xantari fleet hovered at the edge of Earth's atmosphere, their massive ships cloaked and impervious to detection. The high-ranking officers aboard the flagship exchanged measured looks. No one spoke, but the tension was palpable. The Xantari had conquered dozens of worlds, each one more technologically advanced than the last. But Earth had always remained an enigma. The oldest records in the galaxy spoke of a species that survived countless invasions, yet little was known about how they fought or what made them so unique. It was a puzzle they had longed to solve. Commander Venner, leader of the invasion fleet, was the first to break the silence. His voice was smooth but filled with a quiet urgency. "Prepare the drones. We go in silently. Let's see what these humans are really capable of." Venner was the perfect example of Xantari superiority. Tall, with sleek, segmented armor that reflected the dull glow of the nearby sun. His alien features were angular, his skin a muted silver. The Xantari had never encountered a species they couldn't conquer with ease. They'd perfected their technology to such a degree that entire civilizations had fallen without so much as a fight. Yet Earth had resisted for centuries, and that alone intrigued him. The first wave of scout drones launched, descending silently into Earth's atmosphere, equipped with cloaking devices to ensure they wouldn't be detected by the planet's primitive technology. The Xantari's strategy was simple: gather intelligence, assess the weaknesses, and strike quickly. Venner's fleet would stay in orbit, watching as the drones reported back. The drones made landfall in a remote forest in the northeastern United States. The area was known for its dense foliage, but the Xantari had no concerns. They had the best scanning technology in the galaxy. Nothing could escape their attention. But as the drones sent their first data packets back to the fleet, something was off. The data was incomplete, fragments of information, as if parts of it had been wiped out mid-transmission. This wasn't normal. The Xantari systems were designed to detect and intercept such anomalies. Still, the drones continued their mission, sending real-time footage of the forest below. The images from the drones were disorienting. The dense trees and overgrown foliage seemed to shift in ways that were almost too perfect, almost unnatural. There were signs of human activity, traps expertly hidden among the foliage, subtle structures that blended into the environment, and the unmistakable hum of primitive engines. But there was something else. As the drones moved further into the forest, the entire atmosphere seemed to hum with an unspoken tension, as if the very planet itself was watching. "What is this?" Venner muttered, narrowing his eyes at the flickering images. The data wasn't matching up with their expectations. Before Venner could give the order to analyze the disturbance further, one of the scout drones was hit by an energy pulse. A bright flash of blue light erupted from the trees below, and the drone lost contact with the fleet. Venner's heart skipped a beat. He signaled for a report. "Commander, we've lost the drone," came the response. It was hit by something. Localized energy pulse, too precise to be natural. "It seems to be targeting our technology." Venner clenched his fists. Something on Earth had detected the drones, and it wasn't human technology. This was beyond any primitive species capabilities. Earth wasn't just inhabited by mere humans. It was a world that fought back, and it had started to reveal itself. The legend of the Hornet's nest had just become more than a story. The Xantari had made their first mistake. They had underestimated Earth. The first wave of drones failed, but the second wave would have to uncover more. And this time, the Xantari would be more careful. They needed answers, and they would get them, no matter the cost. The Xantari fleet, shaken but not deterred, adjusted their strategy. Commander Venner ordered a direct landing to deploy a more thorough investigation force. This time, they would not rely solely on drones. They would send in a team of elite soldiers to survey the planet's surface firsthand. Their mission was simple: locate human settlements, assess the threat, and gather intelligence. No more reliance on automated systems that could be compromised. This time, they would see for themselves what Earth had to offer. The team descended in their sleek, near-silent shuttle, cutting through the clouds and toward a small remote settlement in the heart of the forest. It was a picturesque area, an isolated village surrounded by towering trees, streams, and wildlife. From orbit, it looked like any other small, tranquil human settlement, the sort of place that wouldn't pose a threat to an advanced species like the Xantari. But as the shuttle descended further, the sensors began picking up strange readings, anomalies in the planet's magnetic field, strange interference with their communication systems, and bursts of energy that seemed to emanate from the ground itself. "We should have seen this coming," Venner muttered to himself, but there was no time for second-guessing. The shuttle touched down just outside the village. The door hissed open, and the Xantari soldiers, clad in their black, armored exosuits, filed out cautiously, weapons at the ready. They were trained for this, prepared to deal with hostile planets, aggressive species, and any unknown variable the universe could throw at them. But this was different. They felt it in the air, a subtle unease, like they were walking into a trap. The soldiers spread out, moving through the trees and into the village, their footsteps silent. The buildings were small, humble, built from timber and stone, with no indication of advanced technology. There were no weapons visible, no signs of heavy industry. But the deeper they ventured, the more they realized something was wrong. It wasn't the village itself that concerned them. It was the sheer oddity of the surrounding landscape. Every path seemed to lead them in circles, the terrain subtly shifting in ways that made no sense. They were being watched, and they knew it. Then came the sound, the crackling of branches, the rustle of leaves. It was subtle at first, but soon the Xantari soldiers could hear movement in the underbrush. Something was approaching, and it wasn't human. In an instant, they were surrounded. Figures emerged from the trees, humans, but not the docile, helpless humans the Xantari had expected. These humans were calm, but their eyes were sharp and calculating, and their presence was unnerving. "Looks like we've been expected," whispered one of the Xantari soldiers. Before the Xantari could react, the humans launched their attack. The sound of metal snapping, followed by the flash of improvised explosives, erupted from the underbrush. The soldiers barely had time to raise their weapons before the first trap triggered. A net, reinforced with crude but effective wires, entangled one of the Xantari soldiers, sending him crashing to the ground. Panic rippled through the squad. How had they not seen this coming? The humans didn't fight with advanced technology. They fought with the land itself. Branches and vines were used as snares, hidden explosives buried in the soil, and crude energy pulses that temporarily disabled their suits. The Xantari were fast and strong, but the humans were fighting with a kind of ferocity and cunning that felt completely alien. Venner watched the chaos unfold on his communicator, his eyes narrowing. His soldiers were struggling. They were trained to fight in alien environments, to be adaptable, but nothing had prepared them for this. The humans were not just fighting back. They were making a statement. Within moments, the Xantari squad had been neutralized, their weapons stripped from them. The humans were too efficient, too organized for the Xantari to outthink. And as Venner reviewed the live feed, the cold realization hit him. They were not just dealing with a primitive species. They were dealing with a species that had learned, through centuries of invasion and conflict, how to survive in ways that defied all logic. The humans weren't just defending their land. They were made for this fight. And the Xantari had just stepped into their trap. Venner's fingers drummed anxiously on the control panel as he ordered a retreat. Prepare for a new plan. Earth is far more dangerous than we ever imagined. And somewhere deep within the woods, the humans watched, waiting for the Xantari to make their next move. The Hornet's nest had just begun to show its true sting. Commander Venner's pride was wounded, but his resolve only hardened. His first field unit had been thoroughly outmatched by a ragtag group of humans who, according to his reports, shouldn't have had the means to pose a threat. The Xantari had underestimated Earth, and it was clear now that their usual methods of overwhelming a planet with superior technology wouldn't work here. Earth's defenders were something more than primitive survivors. They were strategists, fighters, and above all, resilient. Venner realized that this would not be the easy conquest he had expected. He issued a direct order for the fleet to go into high alert. No more subtlety. No more drones. This time, they would deploy their full might. Venner was determined to see this through, no matter the cost. On the ground, the humans who had captured the Xantari soldiers weren't celebrating their victory. They were preparing for the inevitable retaliation. The human resistance fighters, an eclectic mix of military personnel, civilian strategists, and off-the-grid survivalists, were not new to conflict. They had long anticipated the possibility of an alien invasion. But even so, they had never imagined the Xantari to be this technologically advanced. They had expected a slow, methodical push. What they had encountered was far worse. The humans, led by a tactician named Colonel Diane Harrow, convened at their hidden base, where they held the captured Xantari soldiers. Harrow examined the Xantari's armor closely. Each piece was sleek, sophisticated, and clearly designed to protect against a wide array of attacks. She could see the gaps in their technology, but there weren't many. It was only when the Xantari soldiers were brought into the base's makeshift interrogation room that she began to understand the true scope of the enemy's capabilities. "Who's in charge?" Harrow asked, her voice steady but firm. Venner's second-in-command, a hulking figure named Cher, glared at her, unyielding in his silence. The resistance didn't expect them to speak, but they had their ways of extracting information. The humans didn't use the sophisticated methods of the Xantari. Instead, they relied on pressure, time, and subtle manipulation. Over the next few hours, Harrow and her team interrogated the Xantari soldiers, working with a calm efficiency. They didn't just demand information. They broke down their enemies mentally, peeling away the layers of arrogance and pride the Xantari held so dear. Through their carefully orchestrated methods, the humans learned more about the Xantari than any data probe or spy satellite could reveal. The Xantari. Cher finally grunted, exhaustion in his voice. They have underestimated you. You're not what we expected. We thought your world was weak, divided. Harrow leaned forward, intrigued. And what exactly did you expect, Cher? A world of isolated villages and disorganized tribes. Cher hesitated. You are a species of chaos, but your chaos is your strength. You do not rely on perfect order or unity. You fight, and you fight together. The Xantari thought you were just fragile. We did not see this coming. Harrow's face remained neutral, but inside, she felt the weight of his words. The Xantari had seen humanity as fractured, vulnerable, easily exploitable. The Xantari might have weapons and ships capable of razing entire cities, but they had underestimated the one thing that made humanity dangerous: its adaptability. The Xantari did not know how to fight against chaos, against a people who could find strength in disorder, and turn their very weaknesses into advantages. You have no idea what we're capable of, Harrow said softly. But you'll learn, the hard way. Meanwhile, above the planet, Venner reviewed the reports of the failed reconnaissance. He had learned from the interrogation. Earth's people were unpredictable, more dangerous than he'd anticipated. And their resourcefulness was unlike any enemy the Xantari had ever faced. You wanted a fight, Venner. One of his officers spoke from across the room, his voice tight with frustration. You've got one. But these humans, they're unlike anything we've ever encountered. Venner's lips curled into a thin, grim smile. Yes, and that is exactly why we will crush them. Prepare for Phase 2 of the invasion. He turned toward the vast holographic map of Earth displayed in front of him. We will break their resolve. We will take the fight directly to their cities. If we cannot overwhelm them with firepower, we will make them bow to us in fear. We will show them that their chaos will not save them. But Venner was already beginning to question the truth behind his own words. Earth wasn't a simple target. It was a hornet's nest, one that would sting. And if the Xantari weren't careful, they might find themselves caught in its deadly swarm. Venner's plan was set in motion. The Zantari were no longer proceeding cautiously. They were going to overwhelm Earth with brute force. The time for subtlety was over. They would attack the planet's major cities, crush humanity's resistance, and force Earth to surrender under the weight of their superior firepower. It was the Zantari way. And yet, as Venner's orders were carried out, there was a gnawing feeling at the back of his mind, one that he couldn't shake. The Zantari fleet moved into position over Earth's major cities. Massive warships, cloaked and brimming with advanced weaponry, hovered ominously above urban centers around the globe. Their first strike came without warning. A barrage of energy blasts rained down from the sky, reducing large portions of cities to rubble in seconds. The humans had no time to react. The Zantari had calculated this move with precision, anticipating minimal resistance and a swift victory. But the humans were ready. Venner had underestimated their capacity for defense, and as the energy blast struck, the humans retaliated in ways the Zantari could never have predicted. As the first energy pulse from the warships descended upon the capital city, a wave of disruption spread out across the sky, as if the very air itself was fighting back. The Zantari's weapons fizzled out, their systems malfunctioning mid-strike. The humans had already deployed a fleet of their own, one built from a combination of repurposed alien technology and their own ingenuity. The electromagnetic pulses were not enough to stop them. The Zantari had been wrong about Earth's capabilities. In the heart of the city, Colonel Diane Harrow's voice echoed over the comms, calm and commanding. Activate the secondary defense grid. All units, focus on the Zantari flagship. The humans' resistance forces had long prepared for this day. Hidden deep within the ground, miles below their cities, were highly advanced bunkers equipped with technology designed to counteract any extraterrestrial threat. The humans had reverse-engineered the debris left behind from the last alien incursions, creating an arsenal of weapons that combined human ingenuity with the stolen secrets of fallen invaders. What the Zantari thought was an easy win had become a nightmare. The Zantari fleet scrambled to adjust, but every move they made was countered. Human fighters, agile and precise, launched a series of counterattacks, hitting the Zantari warships with precision-guided missiles designed to disrupt their energy shields. As the Zantari ships began to falter, Earth's forces attacked with an unexpected fury, forcing the aliens to reconsider their entire strategy. Venner watched the chaos unfold from his command center, unable to believe his eyes. The humans weren't crumbling. They weren't running in fear. They were pushing back with a tenacity that even the Zantari could not have anticipated. "They're not like any species we've encountered," his second-in-command, Cher, said, his voice low and troubled. "They'd been preparing for this. For us." Venner scowled, his mind racing as he processed the new reality. The human resistance had been working for years, preparing for an invasion they knew was inevitable. The Zantari had seen Earth as a backwater planet, ripe for the taking. But the humans had used their isolation as strength, learning how to hide, adapt, and fight. This was no longer a war of technology. It was a war of wills, and humanity was not about to surrender. "Their cities are just the beginning," Venner muttered to himself. "We've only seen the surface of what they're capable of. Prepare the secondary forces for ground assault. We'll crush them there." But as he spoke, a surge of uncertainty crept through him. He knew now that Earth would not fall easily. They had underestimated the planet's inhabitants, and this war would cost more than they had planned for. At that moment, the true nature of Earth's reputation became clear. Earth had always been known as the Hornet's nest, a place where any enemy who dared to strike would be stung by the fierce, unyielding determination of its people. And now, for the first time, the Zantari understood why. The humans weren't simply fighting to survive. They were fighting for their very existence. The Zantari fleet, now reeling from their failed orbital bombardment, began to shift strategies. Venner had underestimated Earth's ability to mount a cohesive, coordinated defense, but now he understood the stakes. It was not just a matter of technology. It was a matter of survival, and the humans had demonstrated a resilience far beyond what he had expected. They had already absorbed the initial shock of the Xantari assault, and now they were countering with a speed and precision that made the commander question everything he thought he knew about warfare. Venner stood at the heart of his flagship, staring down at the holographic map of Earth as it flickered and shifted under the weight of their ongoing operations. The cities were still standing. The humans had erected force fields over some of their most critical locations. Their technology had somehow evolved in ways that the Xantari couldn't trace. Every time they attacked, Earth responded with even greater force, and for the first time in his career, Venner felt the sting of uncertainty. "They're digging in," Cher said, his tone grim. "We've lost communications with several forward units. The humans are mobilizing faster than we can react." Venner's eyes narrowed. He'd been a part of countless campaigns, but Earth was unlike any other planet they'd conquered. On many worlds, resistance was feeble, short-lived at best, but here, the humans were adapting in real time, learning from each encounter and turning the tide with every passing hour. The energy shields around major cities were the least of their worries now. The humans had escalated their tactics. The Xantari had invaded with the expectation that Earth's defenses would be disorganized, but that was before they understood the true nature of human ingenuity. The humans weren't just trying to survive. They were actively resisting, fighting back with an intensity that the Xantari hadn't accounted for. "Prepare the ground assault," Venner ordered, his voice calm but tight with restraint. "We will take the fight to their cities. If we cannot break their will in the skies, we will break it on the ground." Deep within Earth's most secure bunkers, Colonel Diane Harrow surveyed the live feeds from the battlefield. The Xantari's ground forces had begun their descent, massive transport ships descending into Earth's atmosphere, disgorging thousands of heavily armored Xantari soldiers. But as they made their way toward the cities, they were met with a sudden, violent resistance. The humans were ready. Harrow had anticipated the attack. The global resistance had already infiltrated Xantari supply lines and weapon caches, setting up traps in key locations. Every human fighter had been trained not just to defend, but to strike back. The Xantari had underestimated one thing above all else. Earth's people were not just warriors. They were survivors. In the forests surrounding the capital, Harrow's team had planted energy fields designed to jam Xantari communication and disorient their ground troops. Hidden bunkers erupted with coordinated missile strikes, each blast targeting Xantari transport ships and foot soldiers with deadly precision. Humans moved swiftly through the smoke and rubble, like ghosts, taking out strategic positions before retreating into the shadows. The resistance wasn't just reacting anymore. They were taking the fight to the enemy. Across the battlefield, human fighters rode advanced vehicles, modified from the wreckage of alien technology, using high-powered electromagnetic pulse weapons to disrupt Xantari systems. The vehicles darted through the streets, weaving in and out of fire as human snipers took down targets from rooftops. It wasn't just a war of attrition anymore. It was a full-scale counteroffensive. Back at the Xantari flagship, Venner watched as their ground forces were battered, their advance halted by what could only be described as an organized swarm. Humans weren't simply fighting back. They were outsmarting them, exploiting every weakness in the Xantari's tactics. They moved faster, unpredictably, like a swarm of hornets, overwhelming Xantari units with guerrilla tactics. Shar spoke again, voice tight with frustration. "Their ground forces are unlike anything we've encountered. We can't push forward without risking complete collapse." Venner's fists clenched. This was not going according to plan. They had expected an easy conquest, but instead they had stirred a hornet's nest, one that was now awakening in full force. "They will break," Venner said coldly, his voice steady. "They always break. They must." But even as he spoke, doubt crept into his mind. The humans' will to fight seemed unbreakable. And the Xantari were beginning to wonder. Had they truly made the mistake of underestimating Earth? Or had they awakened something far more dangerous than they ever realized? The Hornet's nest was far from finished. In fact, it had only just begun to sting. The battle for Earth raged on with an intensity that neither side had expected. The Xantari, confident that they could break humanity with their overwhelming firepower, were beginning to question their assumptions. Earth's defenses were not just holding, they were thriving. The humans, seemingly an unremarkable species, had unleashed a fury that was making even the Xantari's most battle-hardened soldiers falter. Commander Venner stood at the helm of his flagship, his knuckles white as he gripped the control panel. He had just received another report of failed ground assaults, and it was clear now that Earth's resistance was far more coordinated and capable than they had anticipated. Despite their technological superiority, the Xantari were losing ground. The humans had an uncanny ability to adapt, to turn each loss into a tactical advantage. It was becoming apparent that their greatest weapon wasn't their technology or their numbers, but something else, something far more primal. "They're fighting with everything they have," Venner muttered under his breath. His voice had the edge of a commander who could no longer hide his frustration. How is this possible? Cher, his second-in-command, looked grim. The humans, they've built their entire defense system around surviving something like this. It's like they were waiting for us. Venner shot him a sharp glance. That's impossible. We've studied their history. Earth's societies have been fragmented, technologically backward. They couldn't have possibly predicted our arrival. But they did, Cher replied. It's clear now that they've been preparing for centuries. They've been piecing together every scrap of technology they've encountered. They've adapted faster than we can. Venner's frustration grew. The Xantari's initial strategy had been to crush the humans swiftly, overwhelming them with superior firepower, and then pick off the survivors with ease. What they had failed to account for was that humans were not the weak, disorganized species they had thought them to be. Instead, they were cunning, driven by a fierce will to protect their home. They didn't just survive. They'd fought back. They had been waiting for an enemy like the Xantari, an enemy that would underestimate them. And now they were paying the price. Above the planet, the Xantari fleet struggled to maintain its dominance. They had initiated an orbital blockade, but the humans had begun to outmaneuver them, using guerrilla tactics to disrupt their communications and disable key ships with surprising effectiveness. Human fighters darted through the chaos, utilizing stolen Xantari weapons and vehicles that had been modified with local resources. Their attacks were fast, precise, and relentless. Every day, the resistance forces grew stronger, and the Xantari were beginning to lose control of the battlefield. In the heart of one of the largest human-held cities, Colonel Diane Harrow stood before a holographic map of the planet, her mind racing with new information. The Xantari were regrouping for another offensive, and this time, they planned to strike from multiple points simultaneously. The humans knew they had no time to waste. The Xantari were vulnerable now, tired, stretched thin, and beginning to question their chances of victory. "Colonel," one of her officers said, his voice tense, "we've gathered intel from intercepted communications. The Xantari are planning a full-scale invasion of our last stronghold in 3 days. If we can cripple their command structure now, we might be able to force them into retreat." Harrow's gaze hardened. "This is our chance," she said, her voice low. "We've pushed them to the edge. Now we hit them where it hurts." With calculated precision, Harrow and her team began to mobilize their forces, preparing for the most dangerous assault yet. They would strike at the heart of the Xantari's command fleet, aiming to dismantle their leadership and disrupt their ability to coordinate. If they succeeded, it would cripple the Xantari's invasion efforts and send a message that the humans were no longer just surviving. They were winning. Venner, on the other hand, felt the weight of impending defeat pressing down on him. Earth's resistance had shattered his confidence, and now, as the battle dragged on, the realization settled in. The Xantari were not prepared for what Earth had become. They had underestimated humanity's capacity for resilience, for cunning, for fury. The tide of war had shifted. The Hornet's nest had awakened fully, and the Xantari were learning the hard way that it wasn't so easily squashed. The Xantari fleet was in disarray. For the first time since the invasion began, Commander Venner felt the terrifying weight of doubt pressing down on him. Every attempt to subjugate Earth had been met with an unexpected counterstrike. The humans, who should have been overwhelmed by the might of the Xantari war machine, had fought back with an unrelenting fury that was both calculated and chaotic in equal measure. It was the chaos that unnerved Venner most. How could a species so seemingly fractured be so effective in warfare? Venner's flagship loomed above Earth, its massive silhouette casting a shadow over the planet below. The once pristine warship was now scarred, the damage from human counterattacks evident on its hull. He had underestimated humanity's resolve, and now he was being forced to reconsider everything. Shar stood beside him, his face taut with frustration. "Commander, the humans are gaining ground. They've infiltrated our secondary supply lines. Their resistance fighters are more organized than we expected. We can't keep up with their ambushes." Venner's eyes flicked toward the holographic display of Earth's battle zones, blinking as the human forces surged in coordinated attacks, each one more precise than the last. Cities that had been under attack for days now stood resilient, even pushing the Xantari forces out of strategic positions. It seemed that the humans had learned from every encounter, adapting faster than any of the Xantari's calculations could account for. The most concerning part of the reports was the growing number of human alliances. Earth's various factions, once divided by their own internal struggles, had united under one banner: survival. What had once been resistance pockets scattered across the globe were now an organized, global front. The human will to fight, once fragmented, had coalesced into something that even Venner couldn't have predicted. "They're becoming more than just a nuisance," Cher added, his voice tinged with disbelief. "We're fighting a war of attrition, and we're losing it. They're digging into every one of our supply routes, tearing apart our infrastructure with hit-and-run tactics, and targeting our command centers." Venner clenched his fists, trying to suppress the frustration boiling within him. He had come to Earth with the conviction that this would be a swift and easy victory, but every failure on the battlefield chipped away at that certainty. The humans weren't just surviving. They were thriving under pressure. And it was Venner's fleet that was faltering. As if to add to his worries, an alert flashed across his command console. The Resistance had successfully infiltrated one of their most important strongholds, the central command ship, the Zephyrin. This ship was responsible for coordinating the Xantari fleet's movements, and its capture would cripple their ability to wage war. "They've hit the Zephyrin." Venner's voice was barely a whisper, the words nearly impossible to believe. Cher didn't need to answer. The truth was evident on the screens in front of them. The human forces had launched a devastating attack against the ship's defenses, and while the Xantari had fought back fiercely, it was clear that the tide of battle was turning. "Commander," Cher began, but his voice was filled with reluctance. "If we don't pull back now, we risk total collapse. The humans are within striking distance of the core systems. We can't afford to lose the Zephyrin." Venner stood motionless, his mind racing. Every instinct told him to fight harder, to push the humans into submission. But he could no longer deny the reality. Earth was no longer a planet to be conquered. It was a place of relentless resistance, a hornet's nest that had become too dangerous to provoke. And then, as if the universe itself had answered his doubts, the full extent of human ingenuity was laid bare. A new weapon, born from the scattered alien technologies they had recovered over the years, appeared in Earth's atmosphere. It was a device that emitted pulses so powerful that they disrupted Xantari shields and weapon systems within moments of contact. Venner watched, horrified, as his fleet began to lose its ability to respond to Earth's attacks. The humans had not just adapted to the invasion, they had turned it into their own advantage. Earth's chaotic, unpredictable nature had become the perfect battlefield for their fight for survival. "We're being stung," Venner muttered under his breath. Cher looked at him, his eyes dark with the understanding of defeat. "Yes, and the swarm is coming for us." Venner's gaze hardened as he realized that the Xantari were no longer the hunters. They had become the hunted. The tide of war had shifted irrevocably, and it was clear Earth's resistance would not break. The Hornet's nest had grown to a point where it could no longer be contained, and now the Xantari were about to feel the full force of the sting. The Xantari flagship, Tempestus, trembled under the assault. Venner stood at the helm, his eyes fixed on the holographic map of Earth, watching helplessly as his forces faltered. The once overwhelming might of the Xantari fleet was now nothing more than a splintered force, unable to repel the human counterattacks. The Zephyr had fallen, its capture marking the turning point in the war. Now, Earth's resistance was no longer a nuisance. It was an unstoppable force, and Venner was beginning to grasp the full weight of the mistake he had made. "Commander, we've lost communication with most of our frontline units," Cher reported, his voice strained. "The humans are systematically dismantling our entire infrastructure." Venner felt his frustration turn into a cold realization. The humans weren't merely defending themselves. They were dismantling the Xantari Empire from within. What had started as a tactical war of superiority had turned into an existential struggle. The Xantari, once the feared conquerors of countless worlds, were now being driven from Earth, piece by piece. But Venner was not ready to admit defeat. Not yet. "Deploy the final wave," Venner commanded, his voice steely. "We will not surrender. Not while we still have the strength to fight." The final wave was the Xantari's last hope, a full-scale planetary bombardment designed to scorch Earth's surface and break the will of its defenders. This would be their ultimate move, overwhelming, destructive, and absolute. Yet, as the command was issued, Venner couldn't shake the nagging feeling that it was already too late. On Earth, Colonel Diane Harrow stood in the heart of the human command center, her hand gripping the map of the battlefield. The humans had done what they had always done best: adapt. Every engagement had led to new tactics, new strategies, and now they were on the offensive. The Xantari's final wave was coming, but it no longer mattered. The resistance had grown too strong, too organized. The Xantari were out of time. "Activate the pulse," Harrow said calmly, a deadly certainty in her voice. She wasn't just issuing orders. She was preparing for the final strike. "We take out their fleet for good." Her fingers flew across the controls, and across the globe, the human forces activated their ultimate weapon. A signal pulse, engineered from Xantari technology and enhanced by human ingenuity, fired from multiple points on the planet. It traveled across the atmosphere, converging on the last remaining Xantari ships. As the pulse hit its target, a blinding surge of energy spread outward, crippling every Xantari vessel in range. For the first time, the Xantari fleet was paralyzed. Their systems went dark, their shields failed, and their weapons fell silent. The humans had done it. Earth had fought back with a fury that none of their invaders could have predicted. As the final wave of Xantari ships drifted helplessly through Earth's atmosphere, Harrow's voice rang out through the comms. "This is our planet. We are not your prize." Venner watched in disbelief as his fleet succumbed to the pulse. His ships, once so powerful and deadly, were now nothing more than drifting husks. His command center shook as the Tempestus began to lose power. The humans had not just repelled the invasion. They had crippled the very heart of the Xantari war machine. In the final moments, as Venner's ship spiraled toward Earth's atmosphere, he could only feel a crushing realization. The Hornet's nest, a place he had dismissed as insignificant, had become a graveyard for his ambition. Earth had not only survived, it had become the hammer, and the Xantari had been its nail. Cher's voice was a weak whisper, barely audible over the alarms blaring through the ship. "Commander, we're losing it all. We should retreat." But it was too late. The humans had claimed victory. As the Tempestus hurtled toward Earth's surface, Venner made one final observation. The humans had outlasted them. They had stood against the storm, absorbed the pain, and turned it into something unstoppable. The Xantari had underestimated Earth's greatest strength, not its technology, but its people, their unyielding will to survive, to protect their home, and to fight back with everything they had. Earth's hornet's nest had stung its invaders, and for the Xantari, there would be no recovery. With the fall of the Tempestus, the last Xantari ship plummeting to the ground, the war was over. Earth had won. And the Xantari would never forget why this planet was called the Hornet's Nest.